Wargaming have finally changed one of the top tier heavy tanks into a vehicle that is actually usable, and that is exactly what we're having a look at today in this pretty quick video where we're going to run down what has actually changed with the King Lerva, or the Panzer VII as it's actually called in the game but nicknamed the King Lerva. So the Panzer VII it is a rear-mounted German heavy tank that features a 560 alpha damage main armament that is significantly different to the premium version of this vehicle, the VKK, whereas the Panzer VII gets 560, the VKK gets 750, and with the Panzer VII essentially it is more accurate, it's slightly better at being able to hit on the move, but it did used to have significantly worse damage that it could deal out, and considering that the tanks were basically the same, you would essentially just prefer to have the higher alpha damage on average. Whereas now what's happened to the Panzer VII is that they've increased the armor of this weak point on the side. So typically you used to have a area on the side, which you can see highlighted here on the right hand side just below the turret. Now this was significantly weaker, and just to give you an idea as to how much weaker, it was previously 160 millimeters where we're looking right now, and this area right here was in fact 160 millimeters but has gone up to 300 and 240. Now that means that because this angle is actually quite steep, when you look at it normally now, it's actually significantly stronger than 240. You're more looking at around the 300 mark for this plate here, and then you're probably looking in the region of about 340 for the point on the right and left of the turret that you can see there, and of course there, which means that the one kind of main weak point of the Panzer VII, which was that when you were trying to side scrape you could get penned in these areas on the side, that they no longer become such a problem, which means side scraping with this vehicle, as it's intended to be a side scraping vehicle, as a rear mounted where the turret is set right at the back of the vehicle, now you can actually pull round a corner exposing only the turret, and of course hitting people whilst you do it, and them not being able to hit the lower plate is essentially what the whole side scraping meta is, and you can often actually bounce a ton of rounds when you do this now, because previously you just get penned through that area that we highlighted a second ago, and now it is much more difficult to do so, and it makes this tank very usable. And in fact even the lower plate is pretty strong. It's 230 millimeters thick, that has a little bit of an angle to it, so although you will get penned by premium ammunition from a lot of tier 10s in the lower plate, as long as you're hiding it and angling and moving in these sorts of directions, you should be able to actually bounce quite a few rounds in this thing, and it should make playing this vehicle a little bit better. We have got some gameplay coming up in a second, but I thought I'd do a rundown of this vehicle now that it has been finally buffed and updated to what it probably should have been all this time. So with that being said, this tank is not overpowered. It is not a crazy overpowered tier 10 heavy tank. It is a very competitive heavy tank now that they have changed it. It feels really fun to play it, and having played quite a few games in it, I am definitely considering maybe even going for 3 marks in this thing. It just feels fun to play, and it has something a little bit different, and the rear mounted meta is kind of starting to come into the game, because this wasn't the only vehicle. It was the FV215B, the American tier 10 or the British tier 10 heavy tank that basically never really got used, that has also been changed so that it has the similar sort of problem, has been kind of erased from that vehicle as well. But of course with the Panzer VII being kind of buffed in this way, can we actually use it in a way that is going to benefit it, and how do we actually do that when it comes to the statistics of the tank? Well, we have gone with advanced loader, improved ventilation and gun stabilizer to improve accuracy as well as loading time, and also just boost up the repair speed and all of the other aspects that improved ventilation will boost. So that is going to give us a big benefit, as well as of course making sure that our commander perks allow for example all of the accuracy buffs and the turret buff, snapshot. You want rapid aim, steady aim. You've also got clutch braking so you can turn quicker because it's quite slow. Of course we've got controlled impact. This is to reduce ram damage. This is the perk that was just taken from my kind of more weird German crew, so this is something you could change, and in fact I would highly recommend having something like repair speed to improve how quickly you can put those tracks back on. And of course run and gun for increased accuracy when we're moving, which is really nice, and all of that sort of stuff. Making sure we've got rapid loading, Sixth Sense and Born Leader as the first 3 perks, with Sixth Sense being the first one, and then Born Leader being the second, and then the third one being rapid loading, and then kind of go into your accuracy perks from there. Now this tank is not particularly the fastest in the world, 33 kilometers an hour top speed with 2,500 hit points and a decent amount of penetration and your standard rounds, making this tank very, very fun to play. It is certainly no spotter. You are going to have to play it in a traditional heavy tank way, in where you're basically trying to brawl with other tanks and just be a proper nuisance to them by just making sure that you are side scraping and just angling at all times to whatever opponent you think is going to fire at you next, and that is going to really suit this tank quite well. It definitely feels very, very fun to play, which I can't reiterate enough or iterate enough. And so yeah, I really want to make sure that you guys understand that this tank is a viable option now, and it certainly isn't relegated to some of the worst tanks in the game, or at least one of the irrelevant tanks, shall we say, when you could just play something different that has way better stuff to be able to play with. DPM on this tank, not particularly the greatest, 3,100, but definitely usable, since you're going to be always in an engagement if you're playing it correctly, whereby you just can fire every single time you reload. And yeah, this tank, let's see what it's actually like when we jump into a game and see and test whether we can make it work. And of course that game being Live Oaks. Live Oaks, a map that really is quite a good one for a heavy tank, where you can duke it out in the town area. You don't want to be taking this on a ridgeline. It doesn't have the best gun depression, and although you can use it because it's so tall that often you can actually look over ridge lines, if you do find yourself on a slight incline, you're basically going to be useless, and it can be a right little pain in the backside to actually get it working. So of course, if we can avoid doing that and being forced into playing on a ridgeline and making it flat ground and basically doing anything like that, then that is going to be a big benefit to playing the Panzer 7. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to push into the town and hope that our team can deal with the right hand flank from where we are right now, and then of course try and win the game. Now whether or not that actually works, I guess we'll find out in this game, but I'd be interested to see whether or not you've actually played this vehicle since it's been buffed, or whether you're kind of holding off from playing it. Maybe you want to see what it's actually like, and hopefully this video will kind of show you that this tank is actually competitive now, and it didn't take us long to get a replay like this. A couple games, I think we played about 3 or maybe even 2 games in this thing just to test whether or not that weak point can work. And of course, with it being a pretty fun tank anyway, it certainly feels like you can be quite competitive. And as we push into the town, we do have a little bit of support. We've got a tank destroyer and a heavy. There is a T95 FE4201, which is the chieftain kind of top tier one, that is like the Valor Chieftain T95. And then we're going to push in, not the Tech Tree Chieftain Mark 6, but what we can do here is kind of push towards where this side. Now we do find ourselves a little Progetto. Now with this tank, you kind of want to over angle a little bit because of the fact that you don't have the best of lower plates, and although you can side scrape, my intention here was to just basically go forward because we want to actually make our way over to the left hand side of these buildings so we can over angle the front and therefore hopefully bounce a few rounds. And of course, because you've got such large tracks on this thing, you can actually essentially your tracks will absorb some shells where you can just get no damage done to you and you can just farm people up. So the good thing that I wanted to highlight about this tank is that it has some really, really nice kind of dispersion values. It's because it's not the fastest, your bloom doesn't go out too much, so you can aim pretty quickly. And the other thing is that this tank is one of those that just feels like you can essentially club people, and you can see here the T95 Chieftain's having a bit of a trouble to actually pen us here, looking like he was trying to go for that weak point on the side. And you can see here we have no trouble penning him because the kind of a standard pen of this vehicle is very good. No real troubles against these sorts of heavy tanks. It's only really Mauses and E100s where you will need the premium rounds, and they're very strong anyway, so it's not really like it's too much of an issue. And when you're chunking away damage like 560 every single time, it just feels very, very fluid. You feel like you can really have a good impact in the games that you play, and yeah, this one just feels amazing. And when you have the lower alpha damage, you feel like you can have an impact constantly throughout the game. You're not feeling like you're kind of locked into one position where you're forced into essentially taking a long time to reload and not being able to reposition and get constant damage throughout the game. This one doesn't feel like it, which is the biggest benefit of playing a tank like the Panzer VII. So I want to big it up. I don't think that this tank once again is overpowered or anything like that, but it is a super fun kind of vehicle that I feel like most people will enjoy for sure. We go for a shot on the Progetto here, and then we get hit in the lower plate by the tank destroyer, which yeah, thank you very much, Mr. T110E3, for penning me and setting me on fire. Not the greatest, and we lose a ton, and I mean a ton of hit points here, but our standard pen is enough to go through the Progetto 66. Now you might be thinking, how did we go through the Progetto 66's frontal turret armor, one of the stronger parts? Well, it's because we are so tall that we can essentially shoot down onto the top of the vehicle, or at least we can aim down onto that plate, whereas a lot of people would be on a level with it so that they're having to shoot it at a steeper angle, whereas this tank doesn't have to do that. Now, we're up to 4.5k damage here, which is pretty decent, but the game is not going too well. The enemy team have like 90% of the map here, and we're just trying to get a few shots. We do get penned here, and I believe we actually got penned in the side. We over-angled just that little bit too much and got penned and kind of punished for it, which is fine. It happens occasionally. You know, not everything is absolutely perfect. You aren't going to make the best plays all of the time. But you know, you win some, you lose some, and unfortunately we are definitely on the losing point right now with only 27 hit points left, and we can't even support our teammate here against the E3 because all we can see is a pixel on the cupola of the E3. So rather than trying to fight an E3 who's going to be getting hulled down again, where the only point at which we can pen it is the kind of cupola on the top of the vehicle, but even then with our premium ammunition it is still basically unpennable. So we are going to push back towards the town and hopefully support our tank destroyer, who will hopefully preserve his hit points, and we can kind of trade his health and try and take out a couple of these vehicles, and maybe we could even win this game if it's played 100% correctly, because the tank destroyer is on almost full hit points I believe at this point in the game. So up to 5k damage, we've taken primarily that one hit which set us on fire that really ruined our game here. We would have been on a lot of hits, a lot more hit points, and probably been able to carry this game a lot easier if we did have those hit points. But you know, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, and unfortunately we rolled low on the RNG side this game and got set on fire. Now, of course, I could have avoided that shell entirely by remaining a little bit more passive and not pushing the Progetto, but given that the enemy team were pushing from behind, we needed a bit of urgency to finish them off and then kind of turn around to do what I'm doing here. Just I was hoping I wouldn't have lost all of that hit points in trying to do that. But either way, in coming here, our teammate in the 114 overcommitted too much. He got spotted out in the open and has been absolutely peppered by almost everything on the enemy team. Now you'll see here we have only blocked 1280 damage. Now primarily that's down to the fact that we met all tier 10 tank destroyers with super high penetration, which are the bane of existence of basically any heavy tank, regardless of whatever it is, whether you're an IS-7 or a Chieftain or a Panzer VII, for example. It doesn't really matter. Their penetration is ridiculous. You're looking at 395 heat pen on some of those vehicles, and if you're looking at a Jaeger, even more. So yeah, it can be a big pain to try and even use your armor against those tanks. So the best way of countering it is to not get hit in the first place and try and avoid it. And if you do know that there is a tank destroyer, you want to be making use of the most crazy armor values that you do have on your tank to actually be able to win it. Now you can see here, I'm pre-aiming for the E3 to come around. This game is definitely a loss. I'm on 27 hit points and there are, what, like 8 tanks left in the game by the looks of things with an artillery. And of course an artillery could hit the next postcode from where I am right now and finish me off. So we're going to back it up here. We don't want to get hit by him because that would be a really bad day. And with 5.6k damage done, you can kind of see it's been super easy. We haven't done anything spectacular. It's all been just bog standard heavy tank kind of playstyle things, and all you have to really do is just avoid being hit by artillery. Oh god damn it. And yes, we got removed by the high alpha TDs with crazy alpha damage, getting set on fire and hit by artillery all in one game, and we still managed to pick up 5.6k. So you can see, even in the worst case scenario, when you make misplays, when you get punished, when you get RNG'd, you can still have great results. And this tank is a very, very nice one, I feel like, for players that are wanting to get into a heavy tank role and kind of have a little bit easier than playing the more flatly armoured vehicles like the E100 and the MAUs. And hopefully you'll maybe even give this one a chance. And although the tech tree line leading up to it were significantly worse, they have buffed them as well, so it should be even better to get to this tank. And I think now is a great time to spend your time to actually get this vehicle, try it out for yourselves, and let me know what you actually think of it. If you've got it and you've tried it, let me know whether you think that you had the same sort of experience, or do you think it was a complete waste of time even buffing the weak point. Let me know in the comment section down below. And of course, if you've enjoyed this and you want to see the FV215B, which is the other buffed tier 10 heavy that we're going to showcase, then make sure that you subscribe and like the video if you did. And of course, you can check out some of the other season pass tanks in the gameplay and tank reviews playlist that's on screen right now. And I hope I'll see you there. Goodbye.